Welcome to the Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies, where there's always another secret.
Welcome back to episode 67 of the Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies. Today is October 5th, 2020. I am Bill, and I am joined, as always, by my cartographical co-hosts Amy and Jordan, as well as a special guest, Isaac Stewart. For those of you who might be unaware, Isaac is the person behind much of the gorgeous art that we see in Brandon's books. He's the art director at Dragonsteel Entertainment. So, Isaac, could you mind letting us know, our listeners know a little bit what that exactly means?
Well, there are a lot of things that are involved with that. I think it's just a catch-all that we use to say all the things that I do.
All the visible stuff.
All the different things. It's just like a lot of the other people here at Dragonsteel do more than just what their title is. Mm-hmm. We're a small company. It's amazing to think that an author would have a company at all.
Seriously?
You know what I mean? You know, when I grew up in the reading fantasy in the late 80s and early 90s, it's like, no, that's just an author sitting in a room somewhere writing a book, right? But I guess author companies are a thing now, and I'm grateful for that. But I hire artists, but I also do a lot of project management, meaning I've got to figure out all the different schedules with the artists and the printer, and the typesetting and getting the books scheduled, at least for the in-house books. Okay. And on top of that, I hire out or do the art for the books that are published through Tor and Delacorte, though they do have their own art directors that do things like the cover and that. But we work pretty well with them. We all share information and things. So, for example, on Skyward, I did the kerning on the title, right? How much space is in between each letter. And the embossing on it, because Delacorte was like, why don't you do it? And I'm like, okay, great. then we know we get what we want. Everybody's happy. So there are so many different things that my job entails. I helped run the Kickstarter. I don't know if that really was an art directory thing to do, but
money has an art to it.
But you know, the book was something I had designed, and so I knew a lot about what the materials are and what was going into it. I interface with our print rep and get all of the samples and things like that. So I guess I do a bit of brand management too. I work with Adam when we are putting out. He's doing things on video and stuff, and so we talk about, okay, how is this going to stay on brand? I talk with Kara and her department. And when we're doing different shirts or things, and I make sure that stays on brand, and I also work with all the licensees to one extent or another. Some are pretty hands-off, and others we work with pretty closely. It just depends on what the licensee wants and what's required in the contract.
Very cool. Now, you're also married to Kara, is that correct?
Yep. I was going to mention that I should say that Kara and I are married.
Okay. And Kara is also the one that we were able to talk to. She's the one who helped us get the swag that we've been giving away for our giveaway. Mm-hmm. So a very special thanks to her.
Thank you.
If you could pass that on, we would love that. So.
Yeah, I will. Go Kara. I didn't even know.
Yeah, she took care of us.
She really has. Before we get started with any more specific questions, we do want to remind our listeners that the Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies is not a spoiler-free podcast. So if there's something in the Cosmere that you haven't read and you're worried about hearing spoilers, you have been warned. We're not going to be intentionally diving deep into spoiler territory tonight, but some of the things we discuss with Isaac may reference events that have happened in the Cosmere, so just be aware of that. If you listen to the podcast recordings or watch the videos on YouTube, we'd like to remind you that it's possible for our listeners to interact with us live via chat as we record each episode at www.twitch.tv/innkeeperstable. We record episodes every other Monday night, starting at 7:30 p.m. Pacific Time, 10:30 p.m. Eastern, so please join us and take an active part in the discussion. All right, so diving back into Isaac, and just one of the questions that a lot of our listeners have mentioned an interest in is, what was your first interaction with Brandon like? Is there like a story behind how you came to be the art director at Dragonsteel?
There is. So Brandon and I, in 1999 or so, were both part of BYU, Brigham Young University's The Leading Edge magazine. He was the editor. I didn't see him a lot. He doesn't recall me, but I met a lot of the people who were in the same group of friends at that time. Mm-hmm. And I remember him as the guy who wanted to be a fantasy author. He didn't have any books published or anything at the time. And I maybe had one face-to-face interaction where he and I talked about writing for a few minutes. And that's... But yeah, he was kind of the in-house writer there. And okay. But later on, after I had graduated from college and worked in video games for a while, actually not video games, but 3D animation for videos. Video games came later. I went back to school thinking that I was going to go into optometry because I had a lot of science credits, and so I went back to school as a post-grad student, and I saw Brandon's writing class. I think it was the second year he had taught it, and it was the same class that I had taken from Dave Wolverton back in the day. You
so in a long line of writers from BYU.
Yeah. So Brandon took it the year before I did, and then I took it 2 years in a row after that. I looked it up to see if Dave was still there, and Brandon was teaching it. I'm like, I think I remember his name. I think he was at the Leading Edge. And I emailed him, and he said, why don't you show up at the class? So I did, and we were closer in age than the rest of the students, and we just hit it off and started going out to dinner right after the writing group and things with a couple of other people in the class. And we became good enough friends that he couldn't grade my paper at the end because it wasn't ethical, right?
Yeah.
So
right.
But he had a co-teacher, so she graded the papers of those who started coming to dinner with us after. So yeah, that's. I think so.
Okay, that's cool. I like that.
But yeah, that's how we initially met. But it was at one of these dinners after class that he saw me drawing on the tablecloth at Macaroni Grill with a crayon, and he said, "Oh, you do art?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I have a degree in industrial design." Oh, well, he didn't even know what I did, and he just said, "You want to do the maps for my next book, Mistborn?" And I said, "Sure."
So the map of the Final Empire, that was your first piece in the Cosmere?
That's the first piece in the Cosmere.
Okay. That was before, I think, Brandon had even let everybody know that it was sort of a polar map, and so it was that unusual circle. That's fascinating.
It was one of these things where I think I learned more as we got further into things, right? It's one of these things, for example, with we have the little herald faces on the Way of Kings and the Stormlight Archive book. And when I made those, I didn't know, for example, that Nail has a birthmark under one eye. And so the arch doesn't have that. And later on, I learned that. So there are things like that. And I don't think that just things as we go, we learn. And I look back and I go, I wish I had known that. I would have put a birthmark on Nail's eye. But the Final Empire map was a bit like that, in terms of when I made it, he hadn't yet written The Well of Ascension, and some things changed after we workshopped that in writing group. which, had to do with how the world works and where the poles are and all of that. So, things develop as they go.
So now that was particularly early in Brandon's and your career, particularly together. Have things changed? Like, do you work more directly with him as he's writing on visual stuff, or are there?
Yeah, we do work very directly. I have a standing art review with him each week, and we, a lot of the art and things that come through, he and I have about half an hour a week that we just sit down and go over what's coming through. Mm-hmm. Is it matching his vision? If it's matching his vision, but maybe something in the text doesn't quite match, then we have to make a decision whether the art is right or the text is right. And then we go to Peter or Karen, and then they will tell us whether that's canonical or not. So, and if it's canonical somewhere down, we have to change the art. If it's not canonical and there's still time to change the text, we can change the text. Mm-hmm. But there's kind of this balance and this tightrope that we walk to try to get that right.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
You ever had it where you had some art piece you're really proud of done, and then you find out it's kind of wrong? You're just like, Brandon, wouldn't it be easier for you to just, change it to make this right?
I'm sure that we've had that. I can't think of any specific instances. One of the big ones that was hard was the palace at Kolinar.
Really?
Because Brandon had it in his head one way, and that it was just ingrained with how he saw it. But if we took each one of the intros, we also had to take those, and we couldn't match it to his head canon, if that makes sense. The books were all consistent. The intro, the prologues to each of the books were consistent. We had to write those down. Karen went through and figured out, okay, here are all the turns. This is where Zeth goes. This is where Yasna is going. And then I had to take that and make a map out of it. We showed it to Brandon. He's like, no, that's backward. But he had just kind of been seeing it in his head in reverse, but it was consistent in the books. So that was just one of these things where we had to kind of meet in the middle somewhere and make it all work. We only have one floor of Kolinar Palace on the map, but we have all of them laid out somewhere in the art. Just because we had to kind of create this consistency between the books. But that happens now and then, and we just all get together and work it out.
That is so cool.
So the Kolinar thing, you have me fascinated now. Did you have to map it out sort of like you see like special ops groups, like being like you bust the door in here and you have figurines trying to figure out where everyone is?
We should put figurines on there. We'd have to animate it, right? It'd have to be a little GIF.
You have
here's
war room.
Yasna going somewhere and Zeth going somewhere else.
You basically need the what's the map in Harry Potter? The Marauders map. You need
the Marauders map. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Exactly. Yep. Exactly.
Oh wow.
If
Okay.
you
Go ahead.
If you see me looking over here, it's because I'm trying to create a Twitch account so I can talk to the people who are saying things. So I'm sorry if I've missed stuff. Yeah. I kept writing things and it won't let me log in with Facebook.
That's great.
So yeah. Anyway, I'm trying to pay attention here, but I am trying to make a Twitch account as well.
I'm sure our chat room will be thrilled. So,
but somebody took my name. So
oh no.
It probably was me, right? Somebody took Nazraloff already.
Okay,
wow.
So a lot of the questions we've gotten are about sort of your process as an artist, either your day-to-day life, or just working, or we know that you work with a team. Are there people at Dragonsteel who would be like you would be the leader of that team, or is it mostly outreach to external artists?
Well, Kara has a team. She's the Windrunner.
So all the squires.
I certainly could use an assistant, I think it would take a specialized skill set. There's been a lot of awesome people that we've considered, but I don't know. I'm not a very good windrunner. I think that's just really it. I don't play well with others. No, just kidding. So we do have Ben McSweeney that's he's working
right.
for us remotely.
He just joined, didn't he?
Yeah. So and he's awesome. He's been a friend for a long time, and we do a weekly review as well. And it's good to catch up with him and feel like I'm back at an art studio. So when I worked in video games and in video, 3D animation, you're at an art studio. You're with other artists every day,
right?
And with my job, it's kind of just me, and I have to reach out to artists and sort of create that sort of studio feel. And luckily, there are many artists in the area that I have communication with, and we. Before COVID-19, we would get together in person and chat a bit more. Now it's a little more one-on-one. So that's kind of the studio environment that I have now. It's a little more remote. But I do feel like I have a team. We do have people that we go back to often to work with on like the Stormlight books.
There are several people in the chat room who are volunteering to be your assistant. So,
I was really tempted to just put my hand up and be like, hey.
She's in the area,
well,
so.
I don't know right now what it's going to take, but
no, it's fine.
But drop me an email. You never know.
So you were talking about that art studio feel. Do you have a creative space that you prefer? Is there something that is kind of necessary for your process? Is there music you listen to? That kind of thing?
It depends on the day. I kind of get going and just start working, and I forget to turn on the music, and then at the end of the day I go, wow, I would have liked to have listened to music today. I'm working on so many different things that I have to be in a certain project to be able to sit and listen to music or an audiobook or something like that.
Okay.
One of the things that I do often if I'm doing the writing part of things, because I do some of that for work here too, is I just have white noise, and I turn on this thunderstorm. I love thunderstorms. We haven't had one in months.
Oh, I know.
So I just turn on this rain sound. I love it, and then I just kind of zone out to that.
Yeah, if you want thunderstorms, maybe being in the desert isn't quite the the best choice.
Yeah, I lived in the Philippines for 2 years, and every afternoon for parts of the year we'd have thunderstorms, and I absolutely loved it, and I just miss it almost every day.
I was going to say I grew up in Alabama, but I mean, Philippines, I'll step back because...
Well, I'm sure Alabama has plenty of thunderstorms.
Oh, we've got some wonderful ones. Let's see.
You were talking about your work as a video, in the video game industry. Where were you? What did you work on?
So I worked for a couple of different video game companies. Mainly, I worked for a place called Wahoo Studios, which was also called Ninja Bee. We did some of the early downloadable games for the Xbox 360, like Cloning Clyde, Kingdom for Keflings, Band of Bugs. These were, small indie titles. Getting in on the ground floor of that did really well for the company, and that was fun. I worked with a great bunch of folks there. Cool. Including the guy that wound up becoming the best man at my wedding. His name's Sean Boyles. You can check out his art. In fact, he did our logo, the Dragonsteel logo, right? He did all these sketches, and I adapted one of them for our logo. And he's done our Christmas card for the last 5 years. And we may go back to that. We're trying something new this time for the Christmas card. But so he goes by Spike the Surf Dog on Twitter and places, and he's fantastic. His character designs, he drew a rhino the other day that looked like a pig, right? But it looked like a rhino too. He just pushes these shapes, and he's an amazing character designer and loves science fiction and fantasy, and one of the greatest people in the world. And I don't know how I got on that. But Sean, if you're listening, you're awesome. How did we get on that?
I was asking about your video game
We were just
career.
talking about video games. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so that was Wahoo. So I joined there, and then I got married, and I had to move to a new city about 40 miles away, and got a different job for a while. At that time, I was working for Eat, Sleep, Play. They worked with Sony. We did Twisted Metal for the PS3. So I redid the animation system like 3 times, and then in a year and a half for that, and did a bunch of animations. And then we hired a real animator, and then I got to leave and go back to Wahoo, which was great because we were planning on moving back down to where Wahoo was. So, and the people at Eat, Sleep, Play were great too. Met some great people there. Back at Wahoo, near the end of my time there, we were working with Blizzard, Disney Interactive on Disney Infinity.
Okay.
So if you see the topiaries, I did those. The moose topiary. I mean, they featured in one of the trailers for the game because it was a joke.
That's awesome. That's great.
You know, you can be Mr. Incredible, or you can make a moose topiary. So it was kind of the butt of a joke.
And we all know what people would prefer. I mean,
yeah.
how often do you get to make a moose topiary?
Right.
Not often.
But that was one of the last things I did. We were kind of doing work that wasn't quite as was more like intern work near the end of my stay there, working with Disney Infinity, and Brandon came to us about that time and asked Kara to work for him, and I said, well, if Kara works for you, what do I do? And he says, well, I'll hire you too. So and it's been great. It's a job that I never thought, who would have thought that would exist? You don't go to college to be, I'm going to be the artist for an author. People go to college to be a dentist. That's what I thought I was going to do, dentist or optometry.
But you've become an integral part of Team Dragonsteel, which is awesome.
I hope it's integral,
I
don't know what I would do otherwise.
So what are some of the pieces that you have done for the Cosmere? We talked about the Scadrill map. We talked about the heralds.
Let's see. I'm usually doing the symbols and maps, but
Okay.
I'm also doing random other things. All the symbols and maps in the Mistborn books. What was that?
Okay. So like the Steel Alphabet.
Yeah. So actually, my husband actually had a question about how you do line art and how you get it to look so clean and precise. And he's not an artist by trade; he's an electrical engineer. But he's wanting to do more that way, and he's always having problems getting it to look just right. So he was hoping you had some tips.
Well, some of that is working at a high enough resolution. Because if you work at a high resolution, we say DPI, dots per inch. Things print, you want it to look crisp, you need to go 300 DPI or higher. Okay. And so if you're at a high resolution, for example, if you're drawing something and you have 10 pixels across and you make a jump with your hand, you're really going to see that jump, for example, because there's only 10 pixels that can record that information. But if you're working across thousands and thousands of pixels and you draw that same line, it's going to look a lot smoother, if that makes sense, if your hand
it
does something. Another thing is I really like inking on an iPad. I didn't used to do that, but now I ink on an iPad, and there's something to the algorithm with how they use the Apple Pencil that it just flows really well. I can make it. I just like inking with it. It makes the lines look better than if I'm working without stabilization on like a Wacom tablet or a Cintiq.
Okay.
So do you work primarily in digital then?
Yeah, I do some physical things. I do a lot of my planning physically. For a while there, I started. I was noticing that there was a a demand for original artwork, and so I thought I'm gonna start doing things physically, but it took 3 times as much time because I would plan it. Sometimes I would bring it into the computer to maybe add lettering, because it's a lot easier to get nice lettering in the computer than to hand draw it, right? Because suddenly you're learning not only art and cartography, you're learning calligraphy as well.
Right.
So I've only hand lettered a few maps. So I did that for a while, and it was just taking so much time that I just cut that step out for the most part. The originals that I've done recently are for the Kickstarter that I have going live tomorrow. I did a bunch of little watercolor paintings for that, and that was fun. It was fun to actually create something physical. I love that. I love having an original, right? There's something cool about that. I painted the Roshar map that's on the inside of the dust jackets. I painted that physically, then photographed it, brought it into Photoshop, and fixed the problems.
Now that's the one that the posters are as well, right?
The foil
that's
ones.
based off those. Yeah,
I've got one of the
or the
foil
other way
ones.
around.
I haven't found a frame that is worthy of it yet. So
plus it's such a weird size.
I'm planning to get a custom one.
Yeah, it's such a weird that Roshar is so long and skinny. You know, it doesn't fit well in that the size of a book, right? So we've had to kind of do some different things to make it work right. But it also because of that, it doesn't fit well into standard frames. However, the next Roshar print that I'm working on, I'm trying to figure out a way to get it to fit into because we had so many people who were like, now I have to go buy a really expensive frame to frame this in. And I kind of face palmed because I'm
actually looking forward to getting a fancy frame just because it's so pretty. So,
well, thanks. Those are cool. They just really catch the light. Those are neat.
Well,
yeah, the foil.
The next question is, now that you do most of your work in digital, when you do work in real life, do you sometimes find yourself trying to control Z on a real life?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. The worst is when you're oil painting and you want to control Z because you gotta...
Oh, no.
Yeah, you gotta wipe it off. It's messy, right? Yeah.
So we have Doc FG in chat. He wants to know what the problems were with the Roshar map before you fixed them in digital.
I discovered that I can draw fantasy mountains for a map just fine, right? Painting them is a completely different story. If you watch on my YouTube channel, I have me painting the map, and if you watch carefully, you'll see that I paint the mountains once, and then I go over and I paint them again, and they still don't look right. So, and I'm looking at it right now. It's hanging in my office right there. And every day I look at it and I go, I need to learn how to paint mountains. So I'm still not quite sure if it's done. You know, maybe I'll finish it sometime before Brandon decides to hang it somewhere else. I've considered hiring a real artist to come and paint the mountains for me.
A real artist,
just to be done.
A real
with
artist,
it.
he says.
A real oil painter. Maybe I should say that. But yeah.
So have you done any of the other major art pieces in the Stormlight books? Like, are you the one who does Shallan's art books, or is that?
That's Ben McSweeney.
That's Ben? Okay.
So in The Way of Kings, about 70% of the art was mine.
Okay.
And then with each book after that, less and less has been my art because I'm actually, meddling in all of the pieces of art now. So there's so many things on there that it's somebody else's piece of art, but I feel like, and I don't want to take credit for their art because they've done an amazing job, but there's a lot of work on my side too that goes into making sure that the art is on brand, working out, talking to Brandon with him about it, brainstorming, going back to the artist. we have a wonderful group of people who work on these books. But so in The Way of Kings, all of the end papers are mine. The chapter headings, like the little arches and the chapter icons, there might one is based on Ben's. Zeth was based on Ben's.
Okay.
And then as more books came on, we had other people do the icons. So like Lift's icon in Words of Radiance, Ben did, but it's based on a design that I drew. I drew the icon up, and then I said, Ben, make it look nice. But nowadays, it actually, I just go to Ben and say, we need an icon, and he sends me stuff. So, and then we kind of just go back and forth from there, talking with him, talking with Brandon.
That's got to be nice having somebody to collaborate with on that aspect of it.
Oh yeah, it's great.
I want to ask, there's something that's obviously for our show a little near and dear to our hearts, and that's the Steel alphabet, since our logo is based off of your work on there. What was your inspiration behind that? Like, it's very unique.
So, and I think I might have shown some of these on another stream at some point. I think the Crafty Games Dice stream. For their Kickstarter, I actually showed some of the original ideas, and they looked more like Maori tattoos or something. That's because as I was trying to come up with these symbols. This is how it happened. So originally, we were not going to put symbols in the front of each of those chapters. There was going to be a little drawing, and it was going to have, like little characters in the mist, and each of the parts of the book were going to have a different picture of some sort. And honestly, what it came down to is I didn't have the chops as an illustrator at the time to do that, the way that both Brandon and I envisioned it. But in the meantime, I had been doodling Inquisitor tattoos. And so we thought, well, maybe we can do something with that, and they can mean some of the different metals, and but none of that was working. These tattoos, they were too elaborate. They weren't quite working. And as I was kind of trying to solve this design problem, I found online a picture of these bent pieces of nails. And there was this one that looked almost like the symbol for, I believe, iron, and that just kind of had this sort of bent. It wasn't quite a crescent, but just this bent, rusty nail. And it was on a pile of nails, so there were other nails going around it and under it and things. And it was kind of like a beautiful mind, right? These symbols just start popping off and I started just riffing off of this thing. It turns out that one of the symbols accidentally looks a little bit like the Quake symbol.
That was one of my big questions, because I've always noticed that it does sort of look like the Quake symbol a little bit.
Yeah, there's one of them. Yeah. I can't remember which one it is, and but it's the one that has it's a crescent, and then it has a nail through it this way and a nail through it this way. And that was completely unintentional. And if I had noticed it before we printed it, we wouldn't have used that.
Absolutely.
But completely unintentional.
I think it was 10. So I'm looking at the chart behind me.
But yeah, so that's how that happened. We actually had we've actually had people look online for ancient symbols for steel or iron, right? And find these and think they are ancient symbols, and then just like incorporate it into their logo for like something random, right? Has nothing to do with it. And we have to go to them and say, actually, that's
it's copyrighted.
That's a copyrighted symbol, and you've used it in your logo for fill in the blank, and it just doesn't quite work. So
I'm not sure if you're aware, we actually got in trouble because our original logo used the Cosmere symbol.
So here's our actual patch.
So
for the old one.
original patch.
Had that in there.
So we
Nice.
got an email. We got an email from the lawyer at Dragonsteel.
I hope
It was
I
a
hope
very
they were
nice.
nice.
It was a very nice cease and
It
desist.
was. We've called it the most polite and friendly cease and desist letter you've ever seen.
Well,
plus-
then I had to design the new logo, and then we go meet Brandon at which book sign was it? Skyward.
It was at Costco. Yeah,
Yeah, it was a
Yeah,
Skyward book
you guys
signing.
went. I wasn't able to go.
Yeah, we were just like, hey, if you could sign this for the Sandersonian Institute, and Brandon's like, oh, you're the guys we had to make the new policy for. We're like, what? Sorry. And he's like, yeah, I decided like it's okay if this as long as it's for not. And I'm just like, well, I just got done
academic
3D
use.
animating our logo, so we're not going back now. It's
Yeah, trying to walk the line between we really want to be friendly for fan art and fan creations and things, but we also have we have a lawyer who says this is what you have to do to protect your trademarks, right?
Yeah, to protect
and so
your
we have to
intellectual property. Yeah.
we try to walk this line because we want to be friendly, but at the same time, I mean, if you go to Etsy and you type in Stormlight Archive, you have tons of places that are using the Stormlight name, which is a registered trademark,
Right.
and using my art, stolen, and that none of it is legal,
Right.
And I don't want to get into this too much, but we just have to walk that line, right? How much do we give? Because most people wouldn't dream of doing that.
Of course.
And I know that like when you guys did your Cosmere symbol, you guys weren't even, you weren't trying to rip anybody off. We knew that, right? And so where's that line between fan engagement and protecting your copyright? And
Right.
We're just trying to find that. We want to be as friendly and as possible, and so we'll put it this way: that we want the fans to be happy with us, right? That first and foremost, we want the fans to be happy with us, and we think about that all the time. We want because you all are the reason that Brandon can write books, right, and tell these amazing stories, and so without you, the stories don't exist. So, yeah, I don't know if that makes any sense.
no,
but
it makes a ton of sense.
It does, yeah.
We love the fans and want to be as accommodating as we can.
And we were absolutely happy to change the logo for that
Yeah.
reason, because we do want to respect copy. I mean, we went out of our way to contact each of the cover artists, because for our intro, we used the cover art from a lot of the books, and so we went out of our way to contact each of the artists to get explicit permission to do that. So
And we appreciate that, and I'm sure that the artists appreciate that as well, because I mean, I love it when people reach out about things like that, is because I feel like they're going through the right channels and they care about the creations of other people, right? And it's made me hypersensitive to the creations of other artists too, and I try really hard to not infringe on that, if that makes sense, right? And so, yeah. So I'm glad to see you guys doing that.
But I mean, as content creators ourselves, we recognize it's important. So
Yeah.
okay, so earlier you mentioned the Kickstarter for the leather-bound Way of Kings, and obviously that went off to great success. But
Yeah.
But we were curious, what was your favorite part of the Kickstarter, but either in terms of organizing or in terms of the goodies that you put together? Just is there one thing that really stood out?
It's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of work, but it's been great to see how many people were excited about that. I mean, we sold more books in the first hour than we thought we were going to sell all month, right? We weren't expecting this. And so that was exciting to see this and kind of get a view into how well loved the Way of Kings is, right?
Absolutely.
But because of that, I get to design a cool book, right? So I love books. I love designing beautiful books. I love pushing the capabilities of the printers and the bindery to try to. Because sometimes they'll tell me like, no, you can't do it that way, and I'm like, well, why not? Because we want this to be a really nice book, right? Mm-hmm. Well, sometimes we get pushback where it's like, well, that would have to be done handmade. Well, let's see what we can do with what you have.
I like that you push back on that, because that's how we get some of these really cool features that we aren't even expecting.
Right. And I should point out that our print rep is really patient with me and has been really good to work with us and find ways to do things.
Well, they really have to be patient to deal with the amount of words Brandon puts into a book.
They are long books, yep. And I one of these days, maybe when there's not a global pandemic, I want to go visit the bindery and see and meet the people who are putting these together, because I know that there is a huge contingent of people creating these books, actually physically putting them together in the at the plant in I think it's in Tennessee, and I'm incredibly grateful for them. We've pushed them hard sometimes to get books done in time for us to be able to ship them, and I appreciate that. I think about it. I don't want to push too hard because there's somebody there who probably would like to go home and see their family, right?
Right. So after the Way of Kings Kickstarter's gone the way it has, does that change your expectations for the Words of Radiance Kickstarter that'll be coming up in a few years?
Yeah. So with each Stormlight book, we see more engagement, mm-hmm. and since we're probably 3 years away from the Words of Radiance Kickstarter, that's going to be 3 more years for the Stormlight Archive to grow. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, second books, they don't sell often as well as the first, right? So there will be people who are perfectly happy to just have the Way of Kings leatherbound, and that's fine. They may not want the rest of it. So I think we're going to be in the same boat. I think we're going to say we can't just take it as a baseline how many books we had to produce for this last one. I mean, again, we're just going to have to. It's going to be a shot in the dark, and we'll probably be surprised again one way or the other. I don't know.
Speaking of,
go ahead.
Go ahead, Jordan. Are you going to try and up the ante with stretch goals? Because that's hard to top. Like, y'all seem to have gone all out on the stretch goals for this one.
Well, we blew through the stretch goals in the first 10 minutes or something like that. And what's funny is that the night before, I was calculating things out for the stretch goals, and I showed it to Kara, and I said, this looks like a lot of money. I don't know if we're going to get there. And she's like, you should double it. And so I doubled it, and we still blew through it in 10 minutes. And so
that's awesome.
Yeah, I think we'll be a little bit more judicious on how many stretch goals there are and try to spread them out a little bit farther. But
I actually had some expectations that it was going to go well. I kickstart a lot of board games.
Okay.
And typically the first day is pretty big, and I had seen the sort of hype that was coming up on Reddit and that was coming up in all the different forums, and so I'm just like, this is going to be big. So,
yeah, we have a guy who works down with Kara, Michael, and he was on the forums on Reddit and looking at things, mm-hmm. and as things got closer, kind of telling us, hey, I think this is going to be big, and we're like, okay, he's hearing chatter, maybe we need to double this or whatever. So we had our ear to the railroad track on that, but
you even ended up breaking the website for a little while.
Yeah, we pushed. It seems that we pushed Kickstarter's capabilities for a little bit there. It kind of slowed down a bit. I'm not sure why. They seem like they're pretty robust. So,
well, gotta ask, since big part of this Kickstarter was all the various surge binding and radiant orders. I'm assuming you took the same test the rest of us did. Are you predictably a light weaver, or did you go some other direction?
I'm a bondsmith.
Oh.
That was my second.
The,
and
what's that?
Bondsmiths are least likely to have squires. So
Yeah. So Brandon, I'm the one who kind of put the test together and came up with a lot of the questions, ran them through a bunch of people, and just trying to get it to work. And one night Brandon and I were playing Magic, the Gathering, and we were talking about the test, and I said, and I think that I've jinxed myself because I've created it, so I can't take it. And he just said, Isaac, you're a bondsmith. So but when I took the test afterward, I was a bondsmith as well. So
There you go.
but the author told me that I'm a bondsmith. So even if I tested as something else, I don't think I can escape that. But what was funny was as I was going through this and I was testing it and I was trying to make sure that each of the orders were balanced out correctly and matching what Brandon wanted. I had found 8 of the orders, and finally I tested my 7-year-old daughter and found a Dustbringer. And I was like, whoa, I found a Dustbringer. And then my brother, who doesn't read, he did it, and he tested as a Stone Ward. And I'm like, I found all 10.
Is it
And
a
then I
little
realized
concerning
I
your
am a
daughter's the
bondsmith.
Dustbringer?
Oh, she's such a Dustbringer.
that's awesome.
Well, it's interesting. Dustbringers are very... if you take it in the classical sense of Dustbringer from back when the Knights Radiant were, more active than they are now,
Right.
they are very responsible. I mean, these are the people that you're giving the codes to nuclear weapons, right? Very responsible people. And my daughter is like that. She is this bottle of energy. I've never seen so much energy in one person. And she's excited by everything, but she's obedient, So there's this, it's kind of I think that's why there aren't so many Dustbringers, because that's kind of you think of somebody with all this energy maybe testing the limits or something.
Right.
So anyway, when I found all 10, I realized Brandon was right. I am a bondsmith. I've been trying to collect all 10 orders of Knights Radiant.
Unite them.
Yeah.
Well,
But it was also interesting to see that some of the orders are, we see a lot more people testing as certain orders because some of the other orders are not the types of people who would be reading these kinds of books, but they would exist in the world of Roshar.
Right.
So that's why we don't see a lot of Stone Wards, because you have to have this overlap of somebody who enjoys sports but also enjoys science fiction and fantasy. And I know several people who are like that. But it's not something that is always overlapping in that Venn diagram, right? So you're more likely to find truth watchers who love to read books. And so we have a lot more truth watchers that show up in these.
Well, you brought up Magic the Gathering. Chat now has to know, what decks do you and Brandon play?
So we draft normally.
Okay.
We normally do draft because we both are busy working, living in the Cosmere. And building those decks, it can take a lot of time, cataloging the cards, all of that. But in a draft, you just have to come into it, do the draft, create your deck, play the games. It takes an evening, and then I don't have to think about Magic until the next time that I play. So,
Because you don't have to worry about building a deck.
right,
Maintaining it.
Okay.
and maintaining it, and
Right.
so, but it's fun. Brandon is more of a black-blue player.
Okay.
And I think he's answered that at other places. And I people would probably say I'm more red-white, but I've been shying away from that because I've been trying a lot of things. But the one thing that I don't do very often is black reanimator. I hate dumping cards into the graveyard. And so maybe I need to do that next. I don't know. I'm not very good at Magic. I've just, it's one of these things that I've been playing it for over a decade. I've known about it, and I've played it. The first time I played it was in '94 when it came out. But I'm terrible. I'm not the person you want as your battle status, your battle person figuring out how the battle should go. I'm the one you want painting the glyph on your flag.
Nice. Or designing the card.
Yeah. So,
one of my favorite stories, my Brandon sightings in the wild type stories, back when Howard Taylor had his first or second book come out. Brandon wrote the introduction, and he was there at the shipping party where a bunch of local fans came to Dragonskeep and helped him ship all the books out. And it was funny because Brandon, I think at that point only had 2 books, but he'd brought a bunch of them with him, and there were people there who wanted to buy the books, but they didn't have a card. I mean, they only had a card. They didn't have cash. And so Brandon said, well, if you go to the cashier and you buy a couple of Magic booster packs, then I'll just do an even swap. And so it was just, so that's one of my fun stories of this. Brandon's just trading books to feed his Magic habit, and so
yeah, he's traded books for cards for a long time.
Yep.
But yeah, Magic is kind of his release, his outlet.
And we've all got them.
Yep, and it's fun to watch him get excited about it. The cards, and just he and my brother-in-law comes and plays. He's really good at it too, and they just geek out about Magic cards, and it's fun.
That's awesome. So we talked about the Way of Kings Kickstarter, and now you've got your own Kickstarter that's coming up. You talked about Monsters Don't Wear Underpants. Is that launching tomorrow?
It is. It's launching tomorrow at 9 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time.
That's awesome. And you've been releasing basically the entirety of the book on Instagram, is that?
Yeah, so I finished releasing the entirety of the book on Instagram today.
Okay.
And tomorrow the Kickstarter video has the entire book read out loud.
Okay.
By a couple of famous narrators. So you guys should check that out tomorrow.
And it's absolutely adorable. Like I
thank you.
did look through the whole thing, and I was just like, okay, well, this is just the cutest thing.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about the cover, because it has a monster running away from, someone trying to put some pants on him. It reminds me. So I have 2 nephews, and for whatever reason, when they were super young, they seemed to despise clothes. And like if you looked away for 2 seconds, they would somehow strip down before you looked away and be running around giggling. And it just reminded me of that. Was that the inspiration?
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of children of a certain age where it's just, clothes, it's just not a thing for them. It's just, they'd rather be in their natural state, right? And I've got a couple of nephews now who are that age, and I showed them the video for the book, and it was really great to watch them interact with it and answer the questions as the narrators are reading. But I mean, it's because I think they get it. They're like, yeah, I don't wear clothes either. But yeah, so the another thing about that cover that's kind of fun. It wasn't the original cover, and my originally I had a publisher for this, and gratefully they pushed me to create a different cover, and this is what I came up with, and I'm glad that they did that. But I love Van Gogh's Starry Night, and since this takes place at night, I just kind of took that as inspiration a little bit, just for the feeling, right? A little bit of the colors, maybe, kind of saturated yellow stars and blues and things like that. So it's the cover, it has a naked monster running away from a woman with underpants, his mother. But it's also an homage to Starry Night.
Oh, I love that. I had no idea.
Yeah.
I'll have to take a closer look at that, because that's really cool.
It might be subtle, but I'm like, okay, I'm going to put trees over here, and I'm going to color it this. I wish I could put like a village in the background.
Oh,
but I did put a castle in the background. So.
Well, and then
that's so cool.
Why? I mean, this is obviously a huge departure from what we normally see you work. And what was the inspiration to do a lift a flat book?
So, at the time I was shopping around a hybrid novel, graphic novel hybrid to New York, and publishers didn't know what to do with it. They're just like, we don't know what to do with this. It was completely written, completely scripted, and had art for the first chapter, and they just didn't know. And I realized that was way too experimental. But in the process of shopping that around, and we did get a few bites. It went to acquisitions at a couple of publishers, which ultimately they rejected it. Based on basically, they're like, this book would be 800 pages long. I'm like, wow, I didn't think about that.
Man, Brandon really has
middle
rubbed
grade
off
book
on you.
Well, it was mainly because of all of the art that was going to have to be in it.
Right.
So I understand now why people didn't bite. It was extremely ambitious. But during this time, my daughter, she was young at the time. I don't remember exactly what she was asking me, but it was late at night, and I think I told her she needed to go take a bath and to make sure to put on clean underpants. And she says, "No, Daddy, monsters don't wear underpants." And she had this creepy monster voice, right, that she would do for that. And it just hit me. I'm like, wow, that's a great title for a picture book. And then,
That's great.
the little angel on my shoulder. You don't do picture books. Don't do a picture book. You want to write epic fantasy. And the devil's like, you should do it.
Emperor Palpatine.
Yeah. Mainly I'm saying that in terms of, how many projects I have going and how much time, it's like the angel's
Right.
like, you don't need another project. And the other one, yeah. Anyway, so I wound up pitching it to my agent, and he liked it. And I started drawing up some spreads for it. I workshopped it at least one conference, got some feedback there, and then we put together a package and started shopping it around, and had about 3 publishers who took it to acquisitions, but only one decided to publish it. Ultimately, things didn't work out there, and so we sent it out to a few more publishers, had a very similar reaction. The reaction was, we love this book, we can't publish it for whatever reason. Just we have something that's too much like it, or we don't publish Lift the Flap books, or whatever it might be. Our kids' books aren't doing well right now. So I just decided back in March, maybe I'll kickstart this. Well, let's see how the Kickstarter goes for Brandon's book. I'll get some experience running it. And then let's see if we can do it with this one. So that's kind of what happened there, the trajectory of that book. But yeah, it's a completely different thing. And I don't know if I'll do a picture book again. If this one does well, I have an idea for a sequel called Monsters Don't Like Babies. And I may have to do that one because my youngest child is upset that I dedicated Monsters Don't Wear Underpants to the child that inspired it. And so the other one's like, when do I get my book? Yeah, this is the Dustbringer, right? So I need to write her a book before she just ultimately,
Nukes your house.
Awesome.
yeah, nukes me. So we'll see. I'll probably go back to doing epic fantasy after this.
Now, I know that you did some of the stuff for the broadsheets. Is that right? In the Mistborn Era 2 books.
Yeah.
What other little writing projects have you done? Are you the one who does, say, Naj's notes, or?
Yeah, so I do Naz's notes, and I do. I wrote the broadsheets for Shadows of Self and Bands of Mourning.
Okay.
Brandon, I think, wrote a lot of it in Alloy of Law. Some of it might have been Ben McSweeney, some of the ads in that one. But those are, the later two are 95% me.
That's awesome.
So it was fun because I got to write Alamancer Jack and Shadows of Self. And then, of course, Nikki Savage, who is a character of mine that I've inserted into the Cosmere at Brandon's... with Brandon's permission. Those were a
That's so
lot of fun
cool.
to do. Let's see. I write Naz's notes. So his sort of sardonic,
Long
Well,
suffering.
'cause- but didn't I saw in another interview that you said Brandon, like, because you were getting someone's name wrong in Arithmetist all the time, and that was sort of how Nas got created.
Just a second. I'm trying to answer a few questions now and then. So yes, Nalazar was the guy in Rhythmatist, who was one of the characters in Rhythmatist. And I just kept getting it wrong. And I can't remember if I was just kind of goofing around. I kept calling him Nazraloff. And it turned out that Nazraloff wound up gaining a persona of his own. So when Alloy of Law was made, and we did the maps, we decided that we needed them labeled in a way. So the map of Ellendale is huge, right? And the labels for the streets and things would have been small. We just lost somebody.
Yeah, Bill.
We just lost
Okay.
He's coming back.
Oh, there you go.
Sorry about that. I had a
No.
disconnect.
So the labeling would have been really small. And so he said, well, maybe we need to have somebody label it. And I said, well, if somebody labels it, we need somebody within the Cosmere doing this. He says, well, somebody is collecting these stories. So this could be somebody that's collecting all of the ephemera that goes along with the stories and sending them back to the one collecting the stories. And he said, so why don't you come up with somebody who is doing this? And I can't remember if here I recommended Nazraloff. He's like, well, what about Nazraloff? And so I said, okay, Nazraloff. And Brandon said, welcome to Cosmere. So that was fun.
So is he sort of your avatar within the Cosmere, or is that just more of a character that you...
Well, it's kind of like Nazraloff is kind of my Hoyd.
Okay.
So there are pieces of him that are me, and there are pieces
love
that are not. I mean, I get to call on my grumpy, sarcastic side to write him, right? Because he's just kind of that way, which is a lot of fun. Brandon, when we were trying to kind of figure out his character, Brandon's like, he's like a grumpy James Bond. Like, I like that. He's probably Scottish. So Naz would have probably whatever is the equivalent of a Scottish accent on Threnody. That's how he would talk.
Oh, I love that. That changes everything.
I picture him as a younger Peter Capaldi, but that's because I love Doctor Who.
Oh, that's great. I will definitely keep that in mind on my next reread. All right, we're getting to the point where we should probably start wrapping up. Amy, Jordan, do y'all have any last questions you want to get in? At the end, I would like to do just sort of a rapid fire, A, B, just quick answer.
Quick questions.
Just a few quick questions.
So I know you said you did some of the broadsheets in some of the Alloy of Law and all of those later books, but did you draw the Sunni Cub little ad?
So I didn't draw the
You
Sunni Cub. I can't remember who suggested that. We go through the books and just come up with what sort of ad should we put in there. And somebody's asking here, a hero for all ages. So I came up with the name for that, the idea, and then I gave that to Ben and said, Ben, draw us a picture for a hero of all ages. And he did this really awesome picture that I wish was a t-shirt. But yeah, but he drew the Sunni Cub as well.
Okay, well, because I made one, so that's why I was just going to show you.
Oh, look at that!
Yeah, so
that's awesome.
He's extra fluffy.
That is great! Wow, that's fantastic job on that.
Thanks.
Yeah, Amy's our crafty
cosplayer.
Expert.
Yeah.
Wow.
She made miscloaks for each of us as well.
Yes. So I hope I will tag you when I finally finish my Vin cosplay, so you can see it in all of its.
I want to see these miscloaks.
Yeah, yeah. Awesome. So they're in our feeds somewhere.
Yeah.
So.
All right. So are you up for just a few quick rapid fire questions?
Yeah, sure.
All right. What's your favorite art medium to work in?
I do love painting in oils.
Okay. Is there an art medium that you don't use but you'd love to try?
Play-Doh. No.
Cool.
No, I'd like to get more into ZBrush. I used to do a lot of 3D modeling, and ZBrush is a sculpting tool.
Okay. Very
A
cool.
digital sculpting tool.
There's a question in the chat about your favorite other author than Brandon.
That is a hard one. I grew up, the author that got me into fantasy was Tad Williams. And then Michael Crichton and Orson Scott Card got me into science fiction, so I love their books. And then lately, I love Robert Jackson Bennett. His stuff is fantastic. I could go on and on. And I just laugh my head off with Cherry Pratchett. It took Brandon a long time to get me into that mainly because those books are, it's one long chapter. I had a really hard time with that. But once I got past that, they're so good.
That's funny because Bill took a long time to get me into Brandon Sanderson.
It's true. It's true. Do you have a favorite artist, either modern or classical?
So I love Michael Whelan's art. And of course, I love Van Gogh. I'm hoping that someday some rich person somewhere who owns a Van Gogh will hear me say this and give me this chance to lick it.
I'm not the only one who wants to lick things, huh?
Yeah, I want to lick a Van Gogh.
You may not know this, but Kara sent us a leather-bound copy of The Well of Ascension, and I had to explicitly instruct Jordan that he was not allowed to lick this book.
Never got to touch the book either.
So we were able to give that away for our second anniversary. All right. Favorite Cosmere book or series, either to read or to work on?
I love them all, right? But I love Threnody as a world,
which is where Naja's from. So,
and I love the Mistborn world quite a bit. I mean, I love them all. I love Way of Kings and things, but Mistborn has a place in my heart. It's where I got started with the Cosmere.
Okay. What sort of misting, faring, or twinborn do you think that you would be?
I would love to be able to, slow down time. The one that
Slider?
That Wayne. Yeah, I'm gonna get him wrong. Slider, whatever Wayne is, right?
Slider. I think is what.
That he can. I love that idea. Mm-hmm. I think that would be a lot of fun. I also love the idea of being able to be a coin shot. What's that?
One of our listeners apparently thinks that you're a soother because your voice is, and I quote, unnaturally peaceful and calming.
Oh, thanks. Hopefully that doesn't mean boring.
No.
I think she meant it in a very positive way.
Okay, well, thank you.
Soothing.
Maybe I need to do those videos that they do where people are like just talking about random things.
Oh yeah,
right. Just reading the encyclopedia. Yeah.
Time for Isaac Stewart ASMR.
We've just got a few of these left. Your favorite genre to illustrate? I'm guessing epic fantasy.
Epic fantasy. Yep, love it.
What nation or world in fiction would you most like to live in, either in or outside of Brandon's work?
Oh boy, there's problems in all of the places,
and that's the thing is most of these. It's just like I don't know that I want to live there.
Right. I like to read about these epic wars and things, but I don't want to live through one. Mm-hmm. And so I don't really know. I'd have to think about that. I think the era 2 right now on Mistborn is not too bad. Mm-hmm. Right? They've got to have indoor plumbing.
Fair.
They've got trains. They've got this big metropolitan city that you can be at. It's got to be, like living in Edwardian London or something like that. So anyway, maybe that would be
maybe Ellendale. All right.
Ellendale era 2.
Cool. Do you have a favorite thing that you enjoy doodling?
I like drawing faces and swords.
Cool. Do you have a favorite Cosmere character?
You know, I have a lot. There are a lot, but I really like Bayon from White Sand.
Okay.
He's just so pragmatic, right? He just says it how it is. So he's one that I really like, and I really like Chris too. I think that there's a lot of growth between the Chris that we see in White Sand and the Chris that we see writing the Ars Arcanum.
Absolutely.
And that's interesting to me to see how she got from one point to the other, right?
Mm-hmm. And then do you have a favorite magic system in any literature?
I like my brain went completely blank, but one thing that does come to my mind is Daniel Abraham did a series called the Long Price Quartet, where he has, I think, what they're called the Ondot, which are basically poems that write concepts into being.
Calling Mom Stewart.
No. What?
A secondary interview, very briefly.
I must have said something that activated Siri.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Sometimes when I say seriously, it thinks that I said, "Hey Siri."
That's wonderful.
And it was calling my mom.
I was like, did that say Mom Stewart?
It did. It says
calling
Mom Stewart. So I'm just waiting to see if she's going to call back now. I saw that you called.
There's one question we have to ask him.
Magic system.
Magic systems.
That magic system is really interesting, and it has really incredible costs that are associated with it. The Long Price Quartet is fantastic, and I can't recommend that enough.
Our episode title might have to be called Mom Stewart.
We've had a few. There's one more question we have to ask, because we got to ask the art guy. This was from one of our listeners, Alfonsina. She wanted to know, what are your thoughts on the debates that we see about art in the Emperor's Soul between Gautona and Shai.
I love that Brandon brings in these like philosophical questions, right, into the books, and I love when I read that, I loved philosophy and art. It's so fantastic. So I loved reading that, and I can see Brandon writes this so well that he writes things so that you can see both sides of that.
Yeah, that is probably my favorite of his pieces, just because it's so rich and just absolutely fascinating conversations in there. So,
yeah.
All right. Well,
I will need to go back and reread it to give specifics, because it's
fair.
been a long time since I've read it. I just remember being fascinated and going, she's right. He's right. You know what I mean? I can see both sides of this, but I can't remember where I fall.
And that's a sign of some good writing. So
yeah, it is.
All right. Well, I think that's about time for us. So we should start wrapping up.
That went quick.
Yeah, that actually is a little bit longer of an episode than we normally have done. But we've really enjoyed having you here. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you for having me here. I appreciate it.
To our listeners, the Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies is made possible by the support of our listeners and patrons. The show will continue to be free, but if you want to help us out, you can head on over to patreon.com/Cosmere Studies. Even a couple bucks per episode really helps us out as we work to improve the show. Patrons get immediate access to our Discord channel, where you can talk about the show and the Cosmere with other listeners. It's a great community. We've got a lot of great discussions over there, and you'll also get early access to bonus episodes, exclusive access to other bonus content, and other good stuff. We do love hearing from you, so keep sending in your questions. You can ask us about the Cosmere. You can drop us your idea for topics you'd like us to discuss during the show. And while you're at it, we'd love to hear your feedback about how you think we're doing, as well as any interesting theories you might have about what's going on in the Cosmere. You can send all questions and suggestions in a brief, concise email to cosmerestudies@gmail.com, and we might read it as part of the show. If you'd prefer to send us a physical letter, we do have a P.O. Box at the Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies, P.O. Box 970063, Orem, Utah 84097. Outside of the show, we do have our own personal projects. Amy, what are you working on outside of the podcast?
So my Facebook is Coincidence Cosplay and Props. My Twitter is @CoincidenceCosp because my name is too long. My Instagram is @coincidence_cosplay, and my website is www.coincidencecosplay.com. Halloween, so I got to figure out costumes for me and the kids. But I'm planning on trying to finish my VIN because I really, really need to. And I'm probably going to post more about lovely Suni Cub here, who's totally falling the wrong way. And I am going to do Doc Ock from Into the Spider-Verse, and my daughter's going to be Spider-Gwen, and my son is going to be Venom. He was this close to being Miles, and it was going to be so cool. But I'm going to try and get cool shots with that because they'll have masks, so I feel better about having them on my Instagram and stuff.
Nice.
But that's kind of what I'm doing, and I'm maybe going to try and do the Cosmere Inktober now that I'm not stressed about being on this episode and seeing a famous person. So, that's me.
Awesome. And Jordan, how about you?
You can find me on twitch.tv/splicestream this Saturday at 11 a.m. as long as my DM doesn't get hit by a hurricane, which is apparently a possibility now. Ooh. We are starting a D&D campaign that's going to be done by, for those of you who are familiar with them, Kamizite, who may be insane, but I let him hang around us anyway. So if you're into D&D, you might want to check that out.
Awesome. And when I'm not here, I also co-host The Innkeeper's Table. It's another podcast with my friend Dylan. It's about board games, and new episodes come out on Friday mornings. It's available on all the major podcast sites, so go ahead and listen to us there, or check out our Instagram page at Innkeeper's Table Podcast. Our most recent episode was about that stack of board games that many gamers have that they have bought but never played, often jokingly called the Shelf of Shame. And this upcoming episode is going to be about the concept of fear in the context of board games, sort of getting into the October Halloween spirit. I've also got a bunch of board game reviews over at www.innkeeperstable.com, and I post about games on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at @InnkeepersTable. For those of you who want to support the Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies podcast, but you can't become a patron just yet for whatever reason, we would love it if you would just let your friends know about the show. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and to like and subscribe over on youtube.com/Cosmere Studies. All right, any final thoughts before we head out? Isaac, again, thank you so much for being here. We really enjoyed having this conversation with you.
Thanks for inviting me on. It's been fun.
It's really great.
Yep.
And every time you like my posts or anything, I kind of squeal. It's great.
So I must be already following you?
A Coincidence Cosplay. So
Yeah,
you've liked
maybe,
a few of my posts and stuff like that. So yeah,
You're probably
cool.
following some of the hashtags as well that she's using.
Because I did the Cosmere Inktober last year, but I just haven't done it yet this month. So
well, I'll watch for more of those then.
Thank you.
And do you want to give one last plug for your Kickstarter before we sign off?
Sure. So you can go to monsterunderpants.com to sign up for a reminder. And tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., it'll lead directly to the Kickstarter, and the video will be there, and you can just watch the whole book. And if you like it, consider maybe getting a copy of it for yourself or for somebody else. But I'm not going to be offended one way or the other. I feel like the book is done. It's out there in at least video and audio form, and if people get a laugh out of it, then hey, that's made this year a little bit better. So there you go, monsterunderpants.com. Check out my book, or just watch it and enjoy it, get a laugh.
Awesome. In addition to the live episodes of the show that stream on twitch.tv/innkeeperstable every 2 weeks on Monday nights at 7:30 p.m. Pacific Time, 10:30 p.m. Eastern, listeners can find our videos on YouTube or audio versions of the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and just about any other service that carries podcasts by searching for Cosmere Studies. You can also follow us and contact us through Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook under the profile @Cosmere Studies. And For our next episode and the next few moving forward, we're going to be back to discussing the Rhythm of War preview chapters. So join us for the discussion in 2 weeks on October 19th at 7:30 p.m. Pacific Time, 10:30 p.m. Eastern at www.twitch.tv/Innkeeper's Table. Next time, we're going to be talking about chapters 8 and 9. Until then, on behalf of Amy, Jordan, Isaac, and myself, thanks for listening, and remember, there's always
another secret.
secret.